Billy from Perma Pastures Farm, and I'm doing one of the things I really love to do, and that is to process meat. So folks, what you see here is a deer. Thanksgiving Day, while I was in the process of trying to make a zip line for all my nephews and nieces that were visiting, a couple of young men showed up, and actually they called first and said, "Hey, I hear you process animals." So, being Thanksgiving, obviously not the best day in the world to come by and do this, but I saw it as a pretty good opportunity. These guys have a deer. One of them knew how to gut and skin, and he did a fine job of it. Well, anyway, they had just shot this guy, but it was Thanksgiving Day, and I didn't have. Ideally, what I would have done before now is hung this on a gambrel, and I would have cut it just like everything else, just like every other animal I do, whether it's a pig, a sheep, goat, it doesn't matter. Cow, I would cut them down the sagittal plane while they were hanging on the gambrel. I didn't have the benefit of that because I had too many things on the plate, obviously being Thanksgiving. So what I did was cut it into semi-primals. I had the guys help me. They cut off the forelegs. I left the hocks and everything else on here just to be able to get it in the freezer. Now, in the freezer for wild game isn't the best way I do it. In an ideal world, I'd let it hang in a very cool environment, and then I'd get to it when I could. Let the meat solid, get a little solid, and run away with it. But remember, one of the big things I like to do, and these guys apparently did it, is that I like to gut and skin as soon as possible, no matter the animal. Part of the reason why I'm not the world's biggest fan of scraping a pig, because I like to get those guts out as quickly as possible. Well, anyway, here's where we are. We cut it into primals, we cut it down the sagittal plane, and I'm going to show you folks at home. This is kind of cool and important. 9 times out of 10, hunters will take this part, the tenderloin, they'll rip it out. They'll take the back straps, or what they call the back straps. I'll call it the loin. They take this part, they cut it out. And maybe in the hind quarter, they might get a roast or two out of it. By and large, the kids that drop this off, or when I say kids, they're high school age, they're both seniors, they basically say they take out the tenderloin, they take out the back straps, and then they turn the rest of it into burger, which is what most people do. So here we go. We cut them up here. We cut them at the 5th rib, depending on how you want to do it. I cut them here right before the sirloin, just to get them in the freezer. And like I said, this isn't ideal. In the future, I intend to do a video from start to finish, the best possible way to go about this. Now, as a side note, anybody that wants to know, because I get this all the time, if you want to know what tools we use to get the job done, you can see it in the description below. Remember, as you do that, it's a benefit to us. So hopefully this video is a blessing to you. So, okay, here we got the ham, we got the belly and the loin, we got part of the loin in the capicola. All this is gonna unfold because I'm gonna break it down into pieces. So we cut them here, cut them here. Now, this one's still partially frozen, so I'm gonna put it off to the side, and I'm gonna work on, I'll tell you what, I think I'll work on this first. We're gonna work on this loin where the back strap and the tenderloin are, your skirt steak, all this stuff. We're gonna put everything away, and then we'll come back to everything, okay? So that's where we're gonna start. We're gonna talk about the loin and the belly, okay? Now on a deer, there's a bunch of different ways you can go about this, and depending on where you took your shot, there may be some things that have to get overlooked. Okay, the kid asked that I could turn as much of this into steaks. He wanted as little grind as possible, which is awesome because 9 times out of 10, depending on how you want it done, you can custom. That's the cool thing about custom butchery, y'all. I can do whatever I want. Now, right in here, we have the skirt steak, okay? Or we'll just call it skirt because there ain't much of a steak there. All I'm gonna do is just use the tip of my knife, and you want to try to get all that out of there. This is all going to go into your grind pot. And you want to take your time. I'm moving slow. Now, I got 2 bus tubs here. One is going to be for my grind, the other for connective tissue and things I can't necessarily use. I'm going to look at my loin down here, okay? And I'm going to make this knife score just right along there, okay? Just go back, double check, make sure I'm not getting into my loin. And then on this end, I'm going to cut it all the way up to the rib. Now, I'm going to use my 10-inch so you can see it better. And like I said, some of this is still kind of halfway frozen. So let me just kind of get through there. And I'm cutting right up to that first rib so you can see that right there. See that? It's going to dangle it a little bit, and I'm cut right up to that first rib. Now you got a choice here. I can go one of 2 ways. I can take my bone saw, and remember that imaginary cut? I can sit here and try to get through this if I want it. There's a little side note. A lot of people ask, well, why don't you use a Sawzall? Why don't you do a bandsaw? both of which I have, but I never, ever, ever do it when I teach anybody, whether it's on YouTube or whether it's in person. I never do those things because if you're learning with me, you're going to learn the basics. A little side note, there's a lot of folks out there teaching some high-end butchery techniques, and I personally am not a big fan of that because to me, it's like learning how to slam a basketball before you've learned how to dribble. Now, we're going to go back to basics, and that's what this is. The way I'm going to elect to do this, and it works out especially well, and also I like it because of its elegance and how clean it makes your cuts. So, we're going to try to get through it. There we go. There's one part there. Oops. This cleaver is acting a little bit wonky. I would still rather go with the cleaver right now instead of the bone saw. If you have to go with the bone saw, nothing wrong with that. Make sure your cut's through there. Another cool thing about using the cleaver on stuff like this, folks, is it makes a more elegant and clean cut. Let me get back over here. It doesn't look jagged like a saw would. Now, I prefer to do it because I know it makes the meat clean. Now remember, whether it's a bone saw or your cleaver you usually get all the way through. That one probably needs a little bit of sharpening. Didn't quite get through that one there. So we'll just go ahead, get through it. Bam. All right, so here's your loin. This is your belly. On a pig, I would normally take this off, and this would be your St. Louis style ribs. And this part right here and the part behind it would be your bacon. But for now, let me just go ahead and put this off to the side. This will be the first one we work with. Okay, take a look at this. Here's your ribs, here's your belly. Now on the bottom side of these ribs, I'm gonna kind of make a little bit of an incision there. Now all I'm gonna do is ride my knife right up against these ribs right here. Now, is it gonna make a full meal? No. Well, not in the house where William lives, no. So what we got here is we're just gonna have these. This would be more like an appetizer or something like that. Or, if you're a person that doesn't eat a whole lot of meat, maybe it's a whole meal. So we're just gonna kind of run our knife right up against these rib bones. And I'm gonna go real slow, folks. I'm not gonna run through this like I ordinarily would. As soon as I get to about back there, right around here is where the ribs end, okay? So you can kind of make a cut. Just look on both sides. Remember, small cuts. Yeah, those of you that work with me, you know what I'm gonna say. Small cuts, small mistakes. That's the idea. If you have to, use gravity in your favor. Get these ribs off, and I'm just gonna take it real slow. Now, I know that I'm up to here, and this is where the ribs meet. I'm just gonna go ahead and take this whole plate completely out. And notice how I'm leaving the belly down here, and I'm kind of using gravity. If your knife is sharp, you can kind of use it in your favor, you see? Okay. There we go. Okay. So, I'll show you what we'll do with this here in a moment. Now, here we are with the deer breast, and there's certain connective tissue in here. Like I said, with a deer, it will plague you. But there's things like this, like blood meat. Try to cut all that out of there. Now, some people put it into their grind because 9 times out of 10, you're never gonna mess with it. You're never gonna see it. I choose not to because you know what? This is permaculture, y'all. Our dogs need to eat, and they would absolutely love that. So the dog pile will go over here, if I can get this thing off. So I'm just gonna clean it up a little bit. And remember, there is a sense of elegance to all this. So here's my deer breast, and all I'm gonna do is square it off. Put this in our grind pile. And we got a little bit of dried blood meat over here. And right here is where the entrance of the bullet made it. And like I said, it was a 270, so I'm shocked that there's this much meat on here in this spot. There's your deer breast. So here we are in the deer ribs. And believe it or not, y'all, even though I took off the belly, I mean, there is a fair amount of meat on these ribs. It works better when you can kind of use a butter knife, get a hold of it. And you can do this on all your store-bought ribs if you have to buy them. They usually don't take them off. But you see this? Usually comes off in one piece. Not so much right here. And then I like to save them. Whenever I get any kind of connective tissue on a deer, if you have dogs, man, they're gonna love you for that. There's a little plastic, not plastic, hopefully it's not plastic. There's that little film in here that you wanna try to get off. All right, y'all, look at that, beautiful deer ribs. And like I said, this is why custom butchery is cool, because show me, no matter the animal, I don't care, pig, otherwise, when you get your ribs back, that skin inside there is always going to be attached. You're not gonna take the time to take a little bit of effort it requires to get that off, but hey, there you go. Look at that, beautiful ribs. All right, so we got our breast, we got the ribs over here. Now we're gonna mess with this loin. Here we go, here's our loin. Kind of briefly talked about it before. This is the area that most hunters, most people that process these things, this is where everybody focuses on. Okay, your hunting steel, no matter the animal, you can run that sucker right down the middle of that spine and take out all that spinal cord just like so. Oh, you go right there. Dogs love that. Okay, so I got my, hopefully you can see this, I got bone-in chops over here, boneless chops I'm gonna make over here. Now I'm gonna find where that last rib ends, okay? It's pretty obvious right here, but I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna run my knife. You can see it all the way around here. Now we got this silver skin, which we'll deal with in a moment. I'm gonna basically run my knife at the end of that last rib, okay? I'm gonna just kind of ride it over like so. There you go. Just like so. I can ride it all the way like that. And then you'll see me use, if this was on a pig, I would go ahead and use a saw, which I could do, but I'm gonna find where that vertebrae breaks right there. See that? I'm gonna kind of halfway get my knife started up in there. And then real easy, like I said, this is not the most efficient way to do it, but I'm showing you the way that you can do it at home and exploit it, okay? There you go. With a good knife, a good solid knife, you can actually get it down through there. So I got my bone in, I got my boneless loin over here. Now, first thing I want to do, and folks, whenever you trim it up, talked about this on pigs before, whenever you trim anything up, you want to do it while it's still in its loin section. It's a lot easier to deal with. So if I got anything on the outside of here, you don't want to do it, you don't want to break this into chops and then start dealing with it, because it's a nightmare. It ain't no fun. I see a lot of people do that, and that's not the easiest way to do it. So I'm just gonna go ahead and clean this up for a minute. Okay. Remember, small cuts, small mistakes. I'm gonna get all this silver off of here. Here we are. Now, this is your chine or the spine. Now, on the animal, it would be situated like this. This, we're gonna make these essentially because it is very, 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 very lean meat. So I tend to make my chops a lot bigger because they don't take long to cook. But what you wanna do, and if you watch my deer butchering video, you'll see the same exact method, nothing different. Okay, so what we're gonna do, go back to our cleaver, and you'll see every place where each vertebrae is. And I'm just gonna take my cleaver, I could run it all the way down, just so you can see it a little bit better. You can barely see it there. I'm just gonna kind of work it in through there like so. Could go all the way. I'm gonna find every place where the spine joins up. Okay, so here's your tenderloin, there's your back strap. So instead of just ripping those out and then trying to make a meal out of it, if I want it, I can come all the way through there, get as far as you can. From a basic sense, I could find where it is, but I'm gonna show you how to do this. One down. Okay, what you have here, wow. Look, y'all, I'm salivating like Pavlov's dog just thinking about this. Okay, what you essentially have right here are deer porterhouses or even T-bones, however you choose to look at them. And this is why I love a cleaver. is that if I'd have made a saw cut here, not only would it be jagged and ugly, the cool thing about this is that it makes it smooth. It's a very, very elegant method for doing this. So look at that, just off this one side, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 really, really thick, wonderful, beautiful T-bones off this deer, huh? How about that? Okay, so we're gonna stick it right back in here. We'll deal with it later. At this point, you could actually just go ahead and bag them up. So here's the other side. These are gonna be your bone-in chops. Now, if you want to go back, watch my pig butchery video up there, or even you could watch the sheep butchering video where I leave these ribs, instead of cutting them off here, I leave them out to here and I French them out. It is one cool, awesome technique. No matter what, no matter the cut, especially on an animal like this, you want to get rid of any connective tissue, any silver skin, and that takes some time to do. So if you have to, keep your other stuff on ice like I'm doing right now, or letting it thaw as I'm actually doing right now. And go ahead and get this stuff out of here. You got your feather bones up here, which I'm ultimately gonna take out. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, we got an outer layer and an inner layer. You can take off the outside of that silver skin on this particular one, and then you got another one in here too. But that's cool, because on this chine bone, you have feather bones that come across the top, no matter the animal. First thing I wanna do is run my knife. This is very, very, folks, if you're gonna take your time anywhere, this is the area you want to do it. So what I'm going to do is run my knife. I'm going to try to situate it where you can see that a little bit better. Right down alongside of that chine bone right there till I hit something solid. And then I'm going to go back to my cleaver. You can even exploit it to a certain degree. You can even exploit it with your fingers, okay? So here we go. Get a little bit more here. And you can always, you're running your knife down until, basically, imagine my knife's on the inside. I'm running it down to where I hit the spinal cord would be, okay? That's where I stop. That's where I want to stop. Okay? Just gonna come like so. Take your time. Right back to what I said, small cuts, small mistakes. Okay. Now, that'll come off here in a little while. Now I'm gonna go back to this silver skin, which is hiding up in there. What I like to do is just kind of get my knife in behind it, take your time, and then just kind of halfway, that silver skin is tough, so you can almost run your knife right up against it like so. You're gonna have to take it off in strips. And you're gonna have to play with the angles to see what you like. Sometimes it doesn't come off in one, because I'm talking to you while I'm doing this. I'm not exactly doing this cut as efficiently as I'd like. So you see these bones in here, okay? Each one of those is going to represent an individual chop. Now, a lot of places, they'll go ahead and get this thing solid and they'll run it through their bandsaw, and so it doesn't matter. But when you're doing this by hand, it requires a greater degree of finesse to make it look pretty. So you see how these bones are angling that way? I'm going to come off the edge of this one. I could go ahead, there's a number of ways you can go about this. We're going to do this differently. Okay, there's one. And we're going to do the same thing with each chop, okay? I'm going to come all the way down till I hit that chine. Your feather bones over here, if I wanted to really make this elegant, I could go ahead. This is why I ran my knife down there before. In each individual chop, like I said, this is one of those more high-end methods, but I'm just gonna show it to you right quick. Now, I'm just gonna exploit it. I'm gonna show you how I prefer to do it. It's your preference. But I'll go ahead, take that off completely, and then here's your bone-in chop. And then we'd go ahead and take this little bit of connective tissue off, make it look pretty. Because that matters. Look at that. Something of a tiny Delmonico. Isn't that cool? Okay, so all these other deer chops, Look at that. I'm gonna go ahead and take the feather bones off. I could have left them completely the way they are. See, the bone is a little bit cockeyed in there, and that's okay. So there you go. All right, well, here we are, y'all. Here's the hind quarter. And obviously, it would be situated on the animal like this. And if you'll look down it, the spine, I know it goes without saying, would normally be right alongside here. I'm saying all that to say this, that we got a few things we want to remove first before, you could call this the ham if you wanted. Ordinarily, if the animal would be whole, that's when I prefer to deal with the shanks and the hocks and stuff, right? Because you can use the weight of the animal to help get that off, because the front quarter is a lot harder. Back one, not so much. And this applies no matter the animal. Okay, so up here is my sirloin. So all I want to do, like I said, I don't need to do this, but we're going to break this down. There's some meat up in here, y'all. And right, basically where this H bone or hip bone is, I'm just going to go ahead. You can learn a lot just by, and it'll unfold here in a minute, just by following the lines on an animal. So right here, there's no, like I said, there's no wrong way of doing this. Okay, we'll go ahead and take it right here. I'm gonna go until in fact, let me use this knife here where I don't really care so much if I hit bone. So I'm gonna hit it right here, okay? And then if you need to, make an imaginary line on this side, on the other side of that H bone, okay? So first thing I wanna do is just make me a mark there. But before I ever do that, because I want the weight, as little as it is, I want that weight up here to help me deal with this shank down here. Okay, same thing. Down here, basically here's your kneecap. So right here, the animal kind of tells you where it wants to be cut. So I'm gonna grab a hold of it with a butcher's cut. I can even look on the other side here. There's a lot of muscle groups in here. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, if the whole animal was here, it makes it a lot easier. No matter the animal, I usually try to, you'll use the weight of the animal to get what you need. See that? Kind of broke it off, okay? So we're gonna bust it at the kneecap. Here's your hock or your shank, okay? Looks pretty good. There you go. We'll talk about that in a minute. Let me get the rest of it broken down. Then we'll talk about how to work it. Okay, so I left the weight of it on here, and I can't say it enough, folks. If you can take off your hocks before, and you're gonna see here in a little while it's more consequential on the front side, it's easier to do. Okay. Now, I'm gonna lay away from the cleaver a little bit, and I'm just gonna take, as soon as I quit hearing bone, I'm gonna stop. Okay. All right, so any good butcher should be able, like Humpty Dumpty, to put it back together again. My table will stay there. Okay, this makes it a whole lot easier. I don't know what I was thinking up here. I went real high. All I'm doing is breaking it at the kneecap. Okay, so we got our ham, we got our sirloin, and it's not this part so much. Everybody kind of turns all this stuff in the ground, especially when it comes to deer hunting or deer butchery. First thing we're going to deal with right off is this shank. But when it comes to your shank, you got a lot of connective tissue in there, and it doesn't, no matter the animal, it's always going to be that same way. But look at that, that's a fair amount of meat. But like I said, my customer, let's pretend he's my customer, he says that he wants very little grind. Right now, y'all, this is my grind pile. There's almost nothing there. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and make him, I'm going to cut this thing the way, well, I'm not going to go into the high end cuts, but I'm going to make a little cut there. I'm going to make him an ossobuco, okay? One of my favorite things to eat in Italian cuisine. Boy, that's beautiful. Look at that. Huh? So you would roast this, and then I would put it into some beans or something like that. So there's an ossobuco. I can get me another one out of here. And just remember, when you're doing your sawing, folks, when you do that, just let the weight of your saw do it. It's going to take more cuts, but when you start pushing on, especially with an old blade like this, it's going to bind up on you. Okay. Another beautiful ossobuco. I'm gonna get that bone dust off of there. Now this one here, it's really not a whole lot there, so I'm gonna put this in my grind pile. And at this point, all I'm gonna do is, in fact, I can just go ahead and do that right now, and then I'll keep the bone. Guess what that bone's gonna be used for? Yep, you guessed it, bone sauce. That's exactly what we're gonna do with it. And then here's another little cool thing too. All these tendons in here, y'all, if you want, you can take them loose. Like right here, you wanna talk about the ultimate dog treat. Want a treat, Opie? You're my old dog. All right, next up is the sirloin, okay? So we're gonna inspect it for silver skin or any connective tissue or anything that just looks unsightly. And I'll put it in my, well, this one I'll put in the grind pile. Okay, I got my dog pile here and I got my grind pile here. So this H-bone is kind of shaped like this, and then it has like a, it's almost shaped like your two fingers like this, and then there's like a big, it just, folks, this is one of them things where it's a nuanced things where if I'm working directly with you, that I can say, hey, you know, lean this way, go that way. You're gonna make those mistakes, and that's fine, but just make the correction on the next one. So there's a lot of different ways you can go about this. So I'm just gonna take my time. It's like I said, remember I told you in the beginning of this video, this is not work for me, y'all. This is honestly how I relax. Okay, just let the weight of the meat, if you have to, hold it up a little bit. Just make tiny cuts. Nobody's in a rush here, or you shouldn't be. Actually, I am kind of a little bit because I got things I got to do today. But generally, you don't just go around here, take a little bit, and then take a little bit more. But folks, if you want to know the most empowering thing you can do, it's not just going out there, yeah, you can go out there and get your vegetables and everything, but if you eat meat, I don't know, it feels good, I think, to demonstrate the moral consistency to be able to do all of it from the time it's born till the time they go into the freezer. Okay, there you go. Just like I said, it looks like a finger. See that? With a fist on the end of it, almost looks like something like that. Okay, now there's some meat to get off of here, but I'm not gonna bore you with that. But this is your sirloin, okay? First thing I wanna do is clean it up. Anything that's blood meat or anything that just isn't gonna look good as a steak, I'm gonna go ahead and take that out right now and get this saw out of the way. Now with a deer, you're gonna find a lot of your butchery can be done just by, and it even works that way in a cow a lot of times, even a pig, just exploiting muscle groups. And I'm gonna tell you right now, and I'm probably gonna say it a few more times throughout this video, that if you have a muscle group, you have steaks. Now, this I could leave on there, but it's not gonna be pretty. Let's see how I wanna cut this. All right, right there. And I'm gonna leave them relatively thick. The kid I'm cutting this for, he's a big old milk boy. So I know he ain't looking for no little steaks, so I'm gonna cut him a little thick, like so. See that? Yeah. But hey, look at that. There's your sirloins right here. Here's your ham, y'all. Took the sirloin off here, took the shank off here. Now, if this were a lamb, I would just go ahead and leave it like this. I mean, a leg of lamb, I'd probably take out this H-bone, get rid of that, clean it up a little bit, you know, take out some of this unsightly kind of stuff, get it out. But you're dealing with wild game, so you don't have that benefit because there's so much silver skin in here, which is, I think, accounts for a lot of the reason why people do so many burgers with it. Now, what you can do is exploit some of the areas you can with your fingers, okay? And you can even see the lines down through here. So where I can't do it with my fingers, I'll just go ahead and connect those lines. And then I'll just kind of exploit it, get my muscle groups. I can go through and tell you what all of them are, but it really doesn't matter. You do the same exact thing really in a cow as well. And there's some steaks in there. Okay, let's look on this side. Let's see what we got. And I can make this, you see this line here, okay? I know that's a muscle group. I could go ahead, start there. Get a little bit more there. And a lot of times you can just run your fingers right through there like so, and then separate a lot of this butchery, especially in the hind quarter, with your bare hands, okay? And then all you have to do is where you see it sticking, you just kind of hit it a little bit with your knife, and then it'll give way. Now there's a gland right there. You don't want to eat that. Kind of get that out. They always look the same, no matter the animal, I think. I know there's an H bone in here. I ain't even worried about it. Ordinarily on a regular ham, I would take it right out, but I'm just going to use my hand. See that? Look at that. You can take most of them apart just with your bare hand. In fact, I'd ordinarily already be through this, but I'm slowing it down right now. I'm going to try to expose this thing up as best I can and still kind of halfway leave it intact. All right, y'all, this is what came out of the ham. There's a fair amount. When you're doing a deer, any kind of wild game, you're gonna have a fair amount of stuff that you're gonna use for silver skin. But like I said, I don't mind because that's gonna be dog food. I could leave every one of these muscle groups in and of itself just as a roast, okay? Here you go, real nice rump roast, chuck roast if you wanted to call them that. But at the end of the day, they're a roast. If I were to keep tearing this thing apart, I'd be down to a tiny muscle group here, tiny muscle group here. I could make those individually in the steaks, but I'm gonna show you a little something here when it comes to deer, and I'm gonna leave these relatively thick. I'm gonna show you something as I cut through it. Okay, it's already small to begin with. That's the first one, okay? That's essentially what it's gonna look like, but I'm gonna keep them nice and thick, and I'm gonna show you what's gonna happen. Doesn't it look like I'm cutting up some kind of tuna? How red that is? Look at that. You don't even really notice the silver skin on the inside as long as you get it from the outside. And it depends on the muscle group. You see that? Use the blade of my knife. There is some silver skin right in there, but when you're with your fork and knife, there's a tiny bit right there. When you're working with your fork and knife, there's no silver skin anywhere here, anywhere here, anywhere here. So you could make that separation with your fork and your knife, okay? So we're gonna cut some more. Beautiful, beautiful steaks right there. Okay, so same thing here. I got one major muscle group here and another one here. There would have been two more attached to this, but I'm gonna square it off. I'm gonna come down here. I know doggone well that ain't gonna make a good steak, so I'm gonna put it in my grind pile. Even right here, maybe touch and go as to whether or not it makes a good steak. Let's take a look. That's good. Look at that. I could even cut this little part off and just leave that as a steak. But like I said, because my connective tissue is on the inside, I'm gonna go ahead and, I don't like the way this looks, so that's going in the grind pile. And yeah, it can be just like that. So here's your steaks. Okay, same thing here, y'all. And I'm just gonna cut the meat right here. If it was a roast, you could leave it just like that, but it's not a roast anymore. This young man wants steak. Boy, I could cut this in a certain way. It almost looked like a fillet. Wow, that's just unbelievable. Excellent quality. We'll cut them nice and thick. Let's see what this one looks like. It's going to be the same thing, what I was telling you about. There is the silver skin on this one is almost imperceptible. It's in there, but it's very, very slight, and it only goes for a certain way. So we'll just go ahead and cut some more. And then when your meat starts cooling off a little too much, that's when you start running into these kind of problems, where your knife wants to drag onto it, no matter how sharp it is. But it's basically the weight of the knife doing, that's how cool that is. Wow. Wow. That said, we're going to get into the front shoulder, and you know, that's that part of a deer that even if people do cut it up themselves, 9 times out of 10, they turn that whole thing into grind. Here's the front quarter. 9 times out of 10, just about everybody out there that processes wild game is going to turn this into grind. I'm going to show you another way of dealing with it. Okay, here's your steel. You know, you usually sharpen up hone up your knives with it. No matter the animal, I don't know why, but the steel always fits perfectly down there. You dig? Look at that. Animals love that. Hey, Opie, come here. For some reason, this is the part of the animal that gives everybody the fits. And now I understand when it comes to the hock, doesn't matter the animal. It's always going to be a nightmare because the way it sits into the bone is this part. Imagine it sitting like this, and then there's a socket that sits down in it, and then it actually moves more like this, okay? It works that way in all 4-legged animals when you cut them up. So if you have any doubts about it, you can kind of play with it, maybe work it one way or the other, just to kind of see where it is. Now, this is where having the benefit of the whole animal when you take this off really helps. So you'll see a fat line in here, okay? You can basically take your knife, get that kind of out of the way. Actually, let me use this. I'll just kind of go really slow because this is the part that gives most people fits. And then I'm going to make an incision. It's okay if you want to turn this whole thing into grind, that's fine. But like I said, this ball and socket thing is really going to make sense here in a little bit. Go on one side, hit it on the other.
Well, hold on, dude. Explain to him it's not just a ball and socket. It's a ball with an extended socket in the front.
Son, I can't go up through all that. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So all I'm going to do again, if you can, this is where the benefit, I'm making it harder on myself actually by not having the whole animal here. So you get over here, and you can even play with it a little bit if you have to. Usually you can push right down once I find it. Now, here's what I'm talking about. Now, a lot of butchers and a lot of people that teach this, they're gonna have you just go through it with a saw. I don't teach it that way. I want you to find, when you're working with me, I'm gonna have you find those spots. As soon as you find it, as soon as you break it, you just come through with your knife and then exploit it more. Okay.
Would you say it's the hardest part?
Huh?
Would you say it's the hardest part?
Oh, without a doubt. This is definitely, because you can see, if you can get up in here, it fits up in there like so. And it's the hardest part, honestly, on the whole animal, at least as far as I'm concerned. So what I'm doing up here, folks, and what I'm feeling for are these feather bones. You can kind of see it. I'm going to try to get in behind them, just like that. And then I'm going to run my knife down in there, just like so. And what I'm trying to do, what the ultimate goal is that this whole set of bones, all of this, I'm going to take it off in one piece. There's some butchers that like to cut it here and then take them off in two different halves. But I'm going to go ahead and take it off in one piece. And all I'm going to do, like around these ribs, is the same sort of thing as I showed you before. I'm just going to ride these ribs all the way around. You don't want to be cutting this way because it's harder. You can use the ribs as your guide, you can see. And kind of hold it up a little bit. See all that? You can just run your thumb through there, pull some of it out. Or if you want, you can keep with your knife, which I'll, by and large, do. Here we go. So we got the shank right here, but essentially all this came right off, okay? There's a lot of meat on there. Like I said, that had to do with the fact that it was frozen. I'll clean that off in a minute. Typically, there's an artery right up in there that it's usually a pretty good indication. When you hit that artery, if you, even though you can't tell what's behind it, when you stick it on that artery, and like I said, it's all frozen up in there, I can't see it, you can generally cut down just north or the top side of the animal of that artery, and it's usually going to put you right where the socket meets the shoulder, okay? What you have up here at the top of your, let's call it a Boston butt in this case, what you have up here is your coppa, okay? Which in Italian means coppa. But but for us, it translates, it means neck. Okay, you see all this in here? Folks, that is not silver skin like you're gonna find all over this animal. But you can see how it separates just like that. And then if I'm doing any cuts at all, it makes itself well known. But like I said, let me kind of get it loose right here. Still, like I said, this thing's frozen, so that's not ideal. So here you go, look at that. That is the copa, folks. No matter the animal, this is my favorite cut, bar none. So I'm just gonna stick it off here. I'll clean that up a little bit. Okay, from here down, I'm gonna go ahead and make that cut and see if I can find it. We're gonna have a shoulder. We got this bone down here that's gonna marry up with the shoulder, okay? All right, so right up in here, this is where, like I said, I can follow the fat lines, and right here, there you go. This is the other end of this bone right here. So all I have to do, just run my knife, and you can see it's kind of frozen down in there. Not ideal, but we can work with that. You see here, I got an arm roast. I was gonna go ahead, this is the part that came off the picnic ham. And like I said, by and large, this would be used for nothing more than grind. I would ordinarily leave the bone in, but part of the deal of doing this for this young man was that I get to keep the bones. So it's gonna have to be boneless. Here's that little flap that sits above the shoulder, and it had the gabagool attached to the top of it, the capicola, right? So go ahead and clean that up a little bit. That goes to the dogs. Let's see here, it looks good. Yeah, we'll go ahead and put that in the grind pile. Okay, now here's your shoulder blade. Whenever you see a bone that has like a little tip in it and then it flattens out and then it comes underneath, it was every single time it came out of the shoulder, it came out of the Boston butt. So what happens here, you can see the end of it here. It's flat on this side, and then on this side it has a ridge that goes kind of like that. So I think what I'm gonna do right off, I'm gonna trim it up. I say let's go with some shoulder steaks. So let me go ahead, at least I'll get a few of them out of here. The rest of it, I could always turn it into grind. Let's see if we can get some shoulder steaks out of here. First things first, go ahead and trim it up. Try to get off all the silver. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna follow this thing, and I'm gonna come over that ridge, come down the other side, okay? We're gonna try this maybe one or two ways. If it doesn't work one way, I'm definitely gonna do it the other way. I'm gonna start off with a saw. We're gonna see if this thing's much of a pain, then I'm gonna go the other way, okay? Okay, as soon as you, remember, that saw, as soon as you get through the bone, chase it. Okay, there's one shoulder steak. So far, so good. We'll go ahead and do the same thing. I'm gonna go ahead and take the right dog to the hunt. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Come up over it, come down the other side. Okay, here's our next one, and you'll see a little bit more of what I was trying to describe. There. It's kind of, this is one area where being frozen actually helps. There it is, and this is what I was talking about here, y'all. It kind of fits flat here, and then you have that ridge. This is that ridge right here up through the top. See that? Not bad at all. At this point, this is where it really starts to become a pain. So all I'm going to do is just kind of bone this one out. I'm going to come down there, get the flat part of that blade, and I'm going to show you a little bit of what that blade looks like. See how it's, yeah, just kind of frozen there. Okay, this is what's left of that ridge of that shoulder blade, okay? And no matter the animal, it looks exactly the same. So when you see shoulder steaks and you see that shape in there, you know exactly where it came from. All right, y'all, I know it's getting kind of crazy, but this happens. This is where butcher block is a whole lot better. So I'm gonna go ahead, here we are dealing with the shank again with a broken, I think I talked William into making me a handle for this. Okay, there we go. We're gonna go right back to making ossobuco with this thing, all right? So here we go. I don't know if this kid knows what ossobuco is, but he's about to, or you know, it depending on where you are. I mean, some folks just call it like a soup bone, which I think is an awful waste because I don't know. I don't know. I guess when you get down to it, it's really the same thing. It's just, yeah, you call it ossobuco. We call it soup bones. Okay, so more ossobuco. This is bone for me. All right, so here's what's going to happen now. The only thing left to do on the front end of this is because it was frozen, yeah, I left a little bit more on there than I would have preferred. So all I'm going to do, I'll just kind of briefly cover that. I'm going to run my knife down these ribs, like so. And get this where I can really get after it. Now, like I said, I'll go back to it. If it weighs, it pays, y'all. You don't want to be wasting none of this. You worked hard to get it. So there we go. That's going to be in our grind. See that? I'm just kind of giving you an example. All those internal, external, and internal intercostals that come out of those ribs, everything coming off the edge of this rib, look, all that's coming off. Here's my grind pile. Here's my dog pile with all of that connective tissue. So with that said, I'm just going to pretty much replicate on the other side of this animal. I might keep a few more roasts in there, but I'm going to just go ahead, stop it here, and I'm going to replicate everything on the other side of this animal, and then we'll show you the whole thing. All right, y'all, so this is a wrap. All right, so of all this, as far as this butchery goes, this is our grind. This is the stuff that's going to be made in the ground deer, ground venison. And ideally, in a perfect world, you'd want to, depending on how you want to do it, you'd want to mix that with some beef fat, okay? And all this over here is connective tissue, silver skin, things like that, things dogs wouldn't mind eating. So I'm going to take this, put it off for a second. That bus tub would be entirely full, stacked over, if most processors were to do it. So here's what we got. I'm pretty happy with it. Everything you see from here to here and up and back here, every bit of that are ham roasts. These are muscle groups that have come out of your ham. So they would be ham roasts, but because we cut them down, we basically turned them into steaks. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, William, I hope you don't mind, buddy. William took one of these, cooked it up, did nothing but put salt on it, and it was off the meat rack. Okay, over here we got your ossobuco, okay? We're gonna call it soup bones. I mean, honestly, what you would wanna do is roast that for a little bit, and then go ahead and then stick it in some beans or whatever else. Now, this is, how cool is that, y'all? How beautiful is that? Look at that. Complete, beautiful rack. The only problem I'm with it, I wish I hadn't done, is knock the cleaver. I just didn't want to use the bandsaw, wanted to do it by hand, but this is more of a higher end technique. But look at that. I mean, I could make lollipop chops out of that, or tomahawks if I wanted to. If you want to know how to strip these, check us out over on Patreon. We'll get that done. Okay, so ossobuco. Look at this, a rack of, my goodness, this is a rack of venison, rack of deer, whatever you want to call. As cool as that is, the best part on every single animal are this right here. This is your gabagool. This is your capicola. My niece is over there laughing right now because that's what it is. Anyway, this is your capicola. You can go ahead and cut these into copa steaks if you want to, but I'm gonna leave them as a roast because I think they are fantastic. And what you see here, folks, that isn't silver skin. That is intermuscular fat, best part of every single animal. I don't care what it is. Now over here are your shoulder steaks. We talked about them before. Differing shoulder steaks, typically, depending on the shoulder, they're gonna be different sizes. Same thing with our T-bones here. How cool is that? This is where I love using the cleaver, y'all, because you can get this bone looking pretty. These are your T-bones. These are your rib eyes. In fact, we can just call them all bone-in deer chops, okay? These are your ribs, and the reason why they're not the same size is because the other half of them is over here on that rack. Okay, here is your deer breasts. We got 2 of those. You can do so many cool braising techniques with that. And then we got 1 roast out of the whole thing. I mean, honestly, 9 times out of 10, when you bring these things in, you're going to get a ton of roasts, almost no steaks. And if you do get steaks, they are never, ever from a processor ever going to look like this. So, I mean, this is about as cool as it gets, y'all. But, as a side note, it seems as of late, a lot of people are trying their hand at this butchery. I want to give a shout out to my friends, Hacks for the Homestead, along with Grumpy Acres. You can find them up there. Check them out, because this is part of what gets me up in the morning and why I love teaching this stuff so much is that Darren, he's at Hacks for the Homesteader. He teamed up with Grumpy Acres and they did this chicken butchery technique that Darren and I invented years ago. And it's a different way of doing all this stuff, folks. And it just gives me such joy when I see so many people out there as of late doing this. In fact, at the Back to the Land Festival, I was having a bad day and I kind of talked about it earlier, but it made my day to see folks not only doing what I taught them, but teaching classes of their own. That's exactly what I want to make out there, folks. If you want to get ahead of all the things that are going on in this world, this is how you do it. You want to get yourself out of that food line and have the best food security you're ever going to find, this is how you do it. If you want meat that's processed in a way that's exactly the way you want it, this is how you do it. You will never, ever, ever, these are the deer cuts that you will never, ever, ever see at your process. I dare say you might see some of these. They'll go ahead and turn some of this stuff into steaks. But all the rest of this, you're not going to see there. In fact, most of it, overwhelmingly, when you process a deer, it's going to be made in the grind. A fair portion of it's going to be made in the grind because they either lack the skill, but 9 times out of 10, they just don't have the time to go through it and process it this way. Remember, if you need any of the tools that we use in here, check out the links down below. We'll list that. Also, if you have any questions, we'll be happy to field any of those. But by and large, techniques, things like that, I'm going to have to show you in person. So once again, if you're interested, let us know. Till next time, this is Billy from Perma Pastures Farm. We'll see you next time.